The following is a presentation of Geekster Media.
Come and knock on our pod, our mini-series that's new. We usually talk about shows that no one knows, maybe this one you do. We're talking Three's Company, Ropers, and Three's Crowd to name just a few. Will and Adam, we too have a pod just for you.
Hey there, TV lovers, and welcome to episode 37 of Remember That Show, the podcast where we revisit the obscure or forgotten TV shows of the 80s and 90s. Having missed our stop on the TV time machine, we found ourselves in the 70s and across the pond. In any case, I'm Will.
Blimey, and digging through the couch cushions for this month's rent, I'm Adam. Is this a pound or a pence anyway?
Since we're in 1970s England, we might as well make the most of it. We've got a special treat for you listeners as we're inviting you to come and knock on our pod as we take a look back at the Three's Company franchise, which got its very roots in the UK. What we know as a farcical sitcom featuring the antics of roommates Jack, Janet, and Chrissy actually got its start as Man About the House, showcasing the antics of flatmates Robin, Joe, and Chrissy. Before we get into all that, we must first look back at our own TV-obsessed childhoods in a segment we call Theme Song.
Now, Will, a big theme of this show is about young people striking out and living on their own. So, Will, what's your memory of your first time living away from home?
Oh boy, I guess college. It was your standard like dorm life situation. It was a freshman dorm, so it wasn't like you had upperclassmen to really like lean on or anything like that. I don't want to say it was like a party all the time because I never really had like a bedtime and I've always had like no sleep schedule. So this was just more of the same, but with internet, which was a very dangerous combination because just as I grew up without cable, I grew up without internet. I think we tried Net Zero for a while, but I had like a 486 and a 56K modem, and that was just not going to get the job done. So yeah, in college, we had a T3 connection. Napster had just come out. I didn't sleep. I don't even remember doing laundry. I think I was that kid who brought everything home at winter break because I had like enough clothes where like if I exhausted everything I had, I could make it a semester. I took that many clothes. I mean, it was cool eating chicken fingers and pizza for every meal because you have like a meal plan and all that. You're not eating healthy. Most of college was either chicken fingers or we had Mongolian barbecue, you know, where they put everything on the stone and all that.
Oh, love it.
Okay, we had that in the dining hall, so I ate that daily. It was either lunch or dinner, and it was like the same order every day. I still get it if I find like a place that does that, you know? It was interesting having no parental oversight, but it was still kind of like you have to figure out boundaries and figure out like life, and that took a while. Like I'm still figuring out a lot of that, you know, but like for me, like the first time out of the house, it was really taken over by like the internet. Like I have written about this not too long ago, but what MP3 hunting was like in the very beginning. People think about Napster and LimeWire and all those, and those were great, but those were the lazy man's way. You had to be Indiana Jones in the beginning of file sharing to find things. Basically, you would find the site, but then the file was zipped and locked. And in order to get the password, you would have to sign up for a German adult site. So German and adult, and you would have to actually receive the email. You couldn't just put in a dummy address. You had to get the welcome email because the password was like the fifth word of the seventh paragraph. That's what I did for like the Aqua album. All that for Barbie girl. That was my first out of home experience. No sleep, but lots of digital contraband. How about you?
That is wild. Yeah. By comparison, see, I didn't have any great ambitions for higher learning. And I was more of a failure to launch scenario because I went to college, but I went to community college and it was like 10 minutes down the road. Like I lived with the freeway behind our back wall. So I would just, drive around, get on the on ramp, and then I could go to the next city over and go to this community college. I had like the basics of freedom initially. It's just like, well, I had a job, but even that, I didn't drive. So even like the early days of my job, my dad just worked down the street. I was working at Disneyland and his offices were down the street. So I would just carpool with him and he would just drop me off. There was so much where I was just like, I'm not really living on my own. And then I go to Brazil. So the first time I'm living on my own, I'm also living in a different country. And I'm living with a guy who was like an ex-drug addict who had cleaned up his act, an ex-army ranger, another guy who he always reminded me of Tom Cruise. But what was most interesting about him was his dad was an undercover narcotics officer. So he had all these stories about his dad, like just, doing the whole deal, like living the drug dealer life. And like when he would be off duty, he'd come sometimes to pick him up from school. And the office ladies wouldn't want to give their son to this dangerous looking guy. And they'd have to call the mom and she'd be like, no, that's my husband. So it was just this weird mix of people, like of all these experiences. And they're like, hey, what did you do? I was goofy at Disneyland. I mean, like I had like no life experience. I like TV. You guys want to talk about TV? How about this movie? It was so weird to me to like be having this new experience. And like, here's the other thing. I didn't even know how to shave. I had an electric razor, but I'd never shaved with like a straight razor. Right. And so like my one buddy, I was just like, hey, do you know how to shave? He's like, yeah, I'll show you how to shave. Like something I should have asked my dad to teach me how to do and I never did. So just weird life lessons happening in a new country with a bunch of new people, So that was kind of my first time living away from home. It's like, oh, be an adult and learn to do stuff by yourself, but you kind of got to learn from other people who got the adult thing handled before you.
I love that you went to Brazil and became a man. You learned to shave and you bonded over shusha. It was a coming of age tale.
This is true, and she was everywhere.
Also, did undercover dad know the other guy who was recovering? Was like, hey, what are you doing?
That would have been a great story. Yeah.
It was like the Spider-Man meme. You OD'd in front of me. You almost made me OD.
And it's like, what's he doing down in Brazil? What's the real story?
Well, to fully understand the climate surrounding this show getting on the air, we'll have to discuss how it got the green light.
So as the world exited the swinging 60s, there were many cultural changes afoot, especially in regards to the sexual revolution. Of course, we know all about that era because we watched Austin Powers. Yeah, baby, yeah. Anyway, the dynamic between men and women was changing, and certain things that never would have been acceptable were now somewhat acceptable. For example, men and women would never have lived together prior to the 60s, but the times were a-changing. Now, these changes were also reflected in entertainment, as the women on TV began to wear pants and have jobs. Heaven forbid. In 1973, Thames Television produced Man About the House, which was considered risque as it featured a man living with two women. It was a hit in the UK, spawning 6 series, that's what those goofy redcoats call seasons, and 39 episodes. It also led to a feature film, as well as 2 different spin-offs, including Robin's Nest and George and Mildred. So, Will, what is your history, if any, with Man About the House?
Like before this, I didn't have a ton of history with it. And it's crazy because like I will say Three's Company is top 3 favorite show. Like I love everything about that franchise. And my familiarity was always watching the credits because I was a credit watcher. I really hated when we moved to like the split screen situation, like watching the credits and it would say like based on Man About the House. And that was kind of common in like the late 70s. It was the same way like Sanford and Son was based on Steptoe and Son. So it was always like these based ons, but I never saw the source material. And you would see like clips now and then if it was like a history of TV retrospective or something, but it really wasn't until the internet when you could just like readily get your hands on these things. I mean, Three's Company had 2 pilots and only one of them has been accessible like within like the last, let's say, 5 years, you know, like it's not exactly lost media, but it's also not really just out there in circulation, you know? So like I knew there was a similar premise with similar characters, but that's where it like ended. I didn't know any of the plot lines. I didn't know their names. Well, I kind of knew that Jack was Robin because of Robin's Nest, because that's the other fascinating thing to me. It's like we have a lot of shows that are adaptations of shows from abroad, but it's very rare for our adaptations to follow that trajectory to a T. So Man About the House spawned George and Mildred, which for us was the Ropers, and it spawned Robin's Nest, which for us was Three's a Crowd. So it's like we adapted the entire franchise, and that's just like fascinating to me. But as far as watching a full episode or more than one episode, this was my first time. How about you?
Yeah, same for me in that even like, the whole idea of the Three's Company pilots and all that, most of that is very new to me. Even though I watched a lot of Three's Company reruns back in the day, I didn't delve into the history. So understanding that it was based on this, this British sitcom was pretty much a revelation here, like this year, learning that that was the case. But it's interesting because I do know that PBS would always play British sitcoms in addition to, stuff like Doctor Who and Monty Python and things like that. So I would turn on PBS and find that type of British programming, but I don't remember this ever coming up after like, Are You Being Served or whatever, like, so it's weird that this was given its connection to Three's Company. You feel like they would have brought it over and made a big deal about it, or that there would have been some sort of like DVD set release, even though most people hadn't seen it. You could tie it to Three's Company and sell it when those DVD sets are coming off. Like somebody should have gotten the license. It's weird that it's so under the radar when, like you said, and we're going to get into it more, it is almost verbatim. At least the first season of both shows are almost identical.
Yeah, it is strange. Like you said, like I grew up too watching the PBS Britcoms, and it was always the same cycle. It was like, Are You Being Served, Keeping Up Appearances, but maybe it's the Thames Association. Like maybe PBS only has a deal with like a certain production company, because it's just like, I don't know, we never got that here. They're still showing 30-year-old Mr. Beans, so it's just kind of like, you guys have other shows. Anyway, seeing the success that the show had, America decided to get in on the action and make an adaptation of their own. They would go through 2 pilots and several cast changes before settling on the final product. In 1977, Three's Company debuted, starring John Ritter, Joyce DeWitt, and Suzanne Summers. It too was a hit, which would go on to run for 8 seasons. Over the course of its run, it would see several cast changes, including roommates and landlords. And like we were saying, like its source material, it also spawned 2 different spinoffs, including Three's a Crowd and The Ropers. So Adam, what's your most vivid memory of Three's Company?
This show was like perennial Saturday reruns. Like that's when I was seeing it, was on Saturdays. Like it always felt like, late into the afternoon, I could find Three's Company. But what it really connects me to, I remember plots, I remember characters, Mr. Furley and his ascots and his jumpsuits and all of that. But to me, it always was associated with this guy named Uncle Jay. Now, my mom, before I was born, maybe it was right after too. I think she was still working with him, but she became the business manager for this fancy artist guy in California. She was going and getting all the deals for him because he wasn't much of a businessman himself, but he was super talented and had a reputation. But he was that like swinging 70s guy. Like, he had like the old man fro and he had a mustache and he always had the 70s shirts that were but I mean, he looked like Larry, basically from Three's Company. And he lived in Pasadena, which was like a world away from where I grew up in California. But it was like shaggy palm trees everywhere. It felt like the Three's Company atmosphere, like when we would go to visit his house and things like that. And he would come to our house all the time. It felt like he was the wacky neighbor or uncle that was coming in with all his stories about life. And there's like pictures of me with Uncle Jay. I'm like on his knee with my Inspector Gadget toy. So whenever I watch Three's Company, I'm just like, was this Uncle Jay's life? Like, was he living Three's Company? I mean, and I never like went to Santa Monica. Like, I didn't know anything about the LA beaches, because we had enough beaches out in Orange County by me, so it was like close enough, but not anything that I had direct experience with. So I always kind of like conflated what I was experiencing here and there with Three's Company. So it felt a part of my life, even though I was so far away from, being like some sort of swinging bachelor, So that's where I come in on Three's Company every time I think about it. Well, what about you, though? You love it so much.
I love this show so much because it's just like 8 years on a big misunderstanding. It's like that's all this show is. And I've watched it as long as I can remember because it ended in like 84, and then like 85, you had Three's a Crowd. I remember I was digging through our house a few years ago and found like an old TV guide from then with like a Three's a Crowd ad in. And I was like, oh, I remember, you know what I mean? It's like, and I'm like three, whatever. But like, it's always been part of my life. It's kind of like MASH. Not so much anymore, but like I would say up until like 2000, it was always in syndication and it was always on. Like here in DC, Fox Channel 5, they used it as like a slot filler. Like let's say a game ended too soon or something like that. It's like, oh, here's a random Three's Company, You could always count on it. And I've seen every episode, I don't know how many times. But I learned a lot from Three's Company in terms of just like how TV works. For example, I figured out syndication from Three's Company. Now, this is probably when I was like 6 because I'm young and I'm dumb and I'm thinking TV is always live. So like when you're seeing a rerun, I'm thinking like, oh, they're performing this play all over again live and they just happen to hit it note for note and have the same wardrobe and that kind of thing. And I remember there's an episode probably like season 2 where like they're celebrating Chrissy and they say like Miss 1978. Like I'm suddenly the gif with Zach Galifianakis and the formulas going across. I'm like, what? But no, it's 1980. What? Like, and then like this is what finally like shattered my illusion of TV because like up until that point, as crazy as it sounds, I figured every TV show, at least sitcoms, because you had the laughter, you had the like live studio audience. I just figured they were all live plays being broadcast. Basically, that was very pivotal for me. But also, like I told you, I never had a bedtime growing up, and like there's certain things about me. I like being places I'm not supposed to be. So like lock-ins at church. It's like, oh, we're at church at night and things like that. So like the same kind of thing. I like things that are elusive. In the same way I said that like Three's Company was a slot filler in the day, Three's a Crowd was a slot filler in like the wee hours of the morning. And there's only like one season of this show, but only until recently was there an official release of it. And it was never included in syndication packages. So it was this like, it was always this white whale of like, what happens to Jack Tripper after Three's Company? We usually didn't get like the TV Guide official book. We would have what's called TV Week, which was in the Washington Post every week. And so like every Sunday, I would go through the week and like notice what's coming on. Cause like I didn't have a VCR yet, So it's like, okay, 6 o'clock, I'm gonna watch Three's Company, and then seven's The Simpsons, but then five is Who's the Boss, and then I check like 2:30 in the morning because that's when they'd slot it in if there wasn't an infomercial running. So it's like you might have to sit through 30 minutes from Guffy Rinker, but then you'd get Three's a Crowd, and it was always this treat because this was the only way to get it. It wasn't on demand. It wasn't on some cable channel, even though I didn't have cable. And you're like crossing your fingers that it's not one of the episodes you've seen because you're trying to work your way through these 22 episodes. And it wasn't a nightly thing. They might do it once a month. So it's like I chased Three's a Crowd through late night for my teen years, you know? But like it's just always been a very big part of my life.
Yeah, I mean, and like you say, with 8 seasons, there's so much to pull from, and there is so much going on with the cast changes, which I think we have to address here real quick with the blonde roommates. Okay. I mean, that's really what it comes down to when you think about this show, because John Ritter, Joyce DeWitt, they are with it all the way through. And Richard Klein, right, is the actor's name.
Because he goes from recurring to cast, because in the beginning, he's just the crazy used car salesman. He's Crazy Larry's used cars. And then suddenly he lives in the building.
Which really quickly, like, because there's not much more to say, because he's definitely, he's basically the model, for Peter's friend on Family Guy, right? For giggity giggity, like that's the Larry guy. But what I'm thinking about is there's an episode pretty late into the series where you find out that Larry is Greek. And like when Jack is opening up his restaurant and nobody's coming, so Larry invites his big Greek family to come, and they do the dancing and they break the plates and they do all this stuff. It's just really funny, like that late in the series you could have this big revelation. And it's also like, what is it with Greek characters on sitcoms? Because obviously we get Uncle Jesse makes a big deal about being Greek and that side of their family heritage. So I just think that's pretty great. I was just like, Larry was Greek. But yeah, the roommate thing. So obviously, like, Suzanne Summers is like the big breakout star from like the first few seasons of the series. I mean, she's the blonde sex pot, but she plays, so innocent, so naive. And so she's got a comedic character. The problem is, right, that she starts realizing, oh, I'm a big deal. I'm the one getting all the attention, but John Ritter's making $150,000 an episode. Why am I not making $150,000 an episode? So she's like holding out essentially on the producers and be like, I'm not going to show up. You don't pay me. Pay me what I'm worth. And they're like, no way. So she can't do breach a contract though. So they work in what? Well, how do they get her to stay on the series but not be on the series? Because they're not happy with her attitude.
Well, this was another thing I learned about Hollywood, because the main reason they pushed back against her raise was because they had a favored nation set up. And a favored nations basically means that if one person gets a raise, it has to be done across the board. So for her to get a raise means Joyce gets a raise, but John gets more. She was never going to catch up to John. How they did it was she went back home to visit, and she would like call them, and like through the phone calls, they do a split screen. So she was normally like standing next to a tree. You know what I mean? Like she was outside for some reason. Like I guess they don't have phones indoors, because even though she lived in this like weird, like almost wilderness thing, her father's pretty cityfied. Like he's a minister.
Well, they say Fresno like it's a small town. It's not a small town. Like,
and you would
it's
see
agricultural in some parts, but
you would see her outside in like an REI vest, like on the phone, like, hi, I'm just calling in, and we have to point out her legal name is Christmas Snow, because I love that so much, but like, and that doesn't last too long. Like she calls in no more than, let's say, 6 episodes, but that's how they handle it. And then they bring in her cousin, Cindy Snow, played by Jenny Lee Harrison. And her whole deal is like, she isn't as much of a sex pot. She's she's tall and she's attractive, but she's very, very clumsy, which also probably got in John Ritter's way because he was the physical comedian. But like she was the one where she'd go through like the swinging door and knock the like tray out of your hand, and she doesn't last long at all. So then they bring in Terry, and like Jenny Lee Harrison hangs on. She's like going to college, but like she's eventually phased out, and then Terry is the roommate till the end.
Yeah, this is so bizarre, the whole Jenny Lee Harrison thing. Like when Cindy shows up, I'm like, she's awesome. She's a little bit younger, you can tell, than the rest. She's got so much energy. And like you say, she feels like she's a great compliment to John Ritter's physical comedy that he is bringing to the show. But yeah, she's probably stepping on his toes. It's so strange when they decide to bring in Terry because Cindy is still in the opening credits, but like she's far away and like she's just kind of standing there. Like they just last minute decision, okay, we'll keep her on even though we're replacing her. And it's only like for like the first like 5 or 6 episodes of the season that she's there. And then she pops in and out after that. But in the credits, like eventually they just phase her out. It is so weird. But then Priscilla Barnes as Terry, she is somebody who, like, the introduction of this character just doesn't make you like her at all. Like Jack is working in the kitchen, he gets a cut. There's this guy who comes into the series who's like a regular, who's always like conniving and trying to get Jack out of the picture.
Felipe!
Yeah, he's so funny. But he tells him like, oh, you're going to lose your hand because it's going to get infected. So he runs to the ER, breaks into the exam room, and Terry is taking care of another patient. And Jack is just like, you got to help me. Oh, I'm going to die, all this stuff. And then she's like, well, you're going to have to get a tetanus shot then. He's like, no, I don't want one. And she is clever and she tricks him into getting the shot in his butt. But then
through his pants. Like, how'd you find the vein?
Yeah, but they just have a real adversarial relationship, and she doesn't seem like fun at all. She's just serious. And then he leaves and runs back to the restaurant. Joyce DeWitt comes in to check on Jack because she finds out he had an accident and he's already gone. So she starts talking to Terry and it just like fades out. And the next thing you know, Terry is at the apartment and they're deciding Terry needs a place to stay and they have to convince Jack, but Jack doesn't like her because of their first confrontation. So she starts playing ditzy blonde, thinking that's what he wants and like that'll make him like her better. And she does that a lot. She's like a weird chameleon throughout the rest of the series where she's always tried to insert herself into the established relationships. And she's like that friend that like just joined the group. She's like a friend of a friend. It's like, look, we've been like going to school together for the last 15 years. I don't know where you came from, but you are not on the same level. Like we don't have the same familiarity, but you're like outgoing and you want to be fun, but it's just not working. Like that's her vibe.
See, I love Priscilla Barnes and I love Terry. Terry's my favorite of the roommates.
Whoa.
Yeah. To me, that's almost a growth thing. You know how there's the meme about how like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, if he were smart and had growth, he would have chosen the girl bringing him the cookies instead of Mary Jane. And it's the same thing here where I'm just like, when I was younger and they had this like season premiere, I totally felt for Jack. And I was like, man, Terry is so mean. And I hate that he has to live with this woman. But like over time, and this is going to sound so crazy, and just like, because this is not that kind of show, but like when you watch part 2, once they say Terry can live with them, they decide that they're going to throw her a welcome party. And Larry and Jack get together deciding to prank Terry, you know, and they're going to do all this stuff to her, like squirting flour and all this. But it's not for fun. It's to humiliate her in front of their group of friends that we've never seen and will never see again. And so like they're going through the motions and like Terry's a good sport and everything, but over time, she's starting to realize, like, oh, as the Brits say, they're taking the piss. They're trying to get revenge on me because we got off on the wrong foot. And Jack, he has this squirt camera, which was in every, like, gumball machine in the 80s, but it's got ink in it. And it was supposed to be disappearing ink, but it's not. And it ruins her new dress. And there's this pall where, like, Terry's just like, she's so vulnerable and she's in front of all these strangers and she's like this new person in a strange place. And this is the meanest we've ever seen Jack do.
Yeah, it's a
like,
very rare, like, dramatic moment.
Like, he wanted to make her pay, but even he knows he's crossed the line. And like, even Janet has turned, and Furley's like, Jack, that wasn't very nice. And like, there's no humor in this moment. And that's the thing that like always sits with me. And it kind of made me appreciate her more over time because of that. But then also, if you watch Mallrats, you'll understand why I love her.
You'll get a real good look at Priscilla Barnes. You sure will.
But yeah, no, like over time, she's my favorite roommate. And I understand why. Jenny Lee Harrison doesn't work because she doesn't bring sexy. She shows up looking like she's on a safari. And that's how she dresses every episode. It's a tan vest and like long, skinny tan khakis. She's not sexy. Like, Suzanne Summers brought Jiggle Vision to television, you know? And then it's like Terry, in her own way, she brought some of that back. But Jenny Lee Harrison is really like your overgrown little sister, while like that was psychologically Chrissy, that wasn't physically Chrissy. And that's really why people tuned in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean that definitely was the big appeal of the show. It did not get great critical reception at the time. And when you see interviews with the cast, they always just talk about how critics hated us, but the public loved us. Like, we got great ratings. I mean, it was a great show. But we're talking about Three's Company. As we go throughout the Come and Knock on Our Pod series, we're going to be getting into all our memories of the details of the show. But we got to get back to the beginning. Well, we got to check out, how did the original version of this series play out? And what do we think now that we've experienced it, knowing the adaptation first? So why don't we find out what Man About the House was all about in our elevator pitch? So, Man About the House starred British actors Richard O'Sullivan as Robin Tripp, Paula Wilcox as brunette Chrissy Plummer, and Sally Tomset as Jo. Now, the pilot is, as we said before, pretty much note for note what you saw with Three's Company, as the two women discover a drunk Robin passed out in their bathtub the morning after the going away party for a pregnant third roommate, Eleanor. And when they discover that Robin is an excellent cook, they decide that he should move in with them, taking Eleanor's place. The main problem, however, would be that they would get the main problem, however, would be how they would get this to fly with their war veteran landlord, George Roper, and his wife, Mildred. Through a series of misunderstandings, which would become the franchise's bread and butter, the women come up with a plan. In order to make it kosher with their old school landlord, the women told him that Robin was gay, and there would be no risk of any hanky-panky. Surprisingly, this worked, and Robin is allowed to move into the apartment.
Over the next 38 episodes, audiences would be treated to a sitcom that challenged social norms in terms of gender dynamics and homosexuality. They would watch the 20-something trio as they navigated life in a world that was quickly changing around them. Meanwhile, we got to see the events through the traditional lens of the Ropers, as they represented the establishment. Robin had just arrived in London and wanted to eventually open a restaurant. Meanwhile, the women worked at the same company doing something? It's not that important. We'd watch as they went out on dates, struggled to hide a puppy from the Ropers, and threw secret parties that were against the rules. Plus, there was a will they, won't they dynamic between Robin and Chrissy. This is where it bears pointing out that America did a character swap. So the person we traditionally think of as Chrissy was actually Jo over there. This means their Jack was in a will they, won't they with their Janet. Get it?
Yeah, which is funny. On the final episode of Three's Company, there's a moment where Terry and Janet are just alone in the apartment. And then Terry's like, did Jack ever make a pass at you? And then Janet's like, no. And then she's like, kind of insulting, isn't it? You know, like, because yeah, that is a big change, right? So that there's something you don't expect. And also, I think, I mean, I don't know if this is a good place to get in briefly to the pilots just again, but it's interesting that the original pilots, like, they were really trying to change it. They took the basic concept and then gave it an all new flourish. Whereas what they landed on was an exact beat for beat, just a few tiny tweaks to make it palatable for American audiences. And that's what worked. So I think that's kind of fascinating. It's like they realized, no, we need to go back to why we wanted to adapt this show in the first place, what made it special.
There's certain like swaps though in the pilot too, where, and this is really subtle, but the roles of Janet and Chrissy in the Three's Company pilot are switched from Joe and Chrissy in Man About the House, because in Three's Company, Janet is the one who discovers the punch bowl ladle has turned green, while Chrissy discovers Jack in the tub.
Yep.
But in Man About the House, Joe discovers the ladle has turned green, and Chrissy, Janet, discovers Robin in the tub. So it's like, and this is probably going to come up in jeers, where I'm almost amazed there were no cast changes here, because they never really figure out what to do with Joe. Because Joe is not the sexy blonde in the UK. She's just the blonde. For like a comparison, she's Sally Struthers from All in the Family. It's like she's cute by default, but men aren't beating each other up to go on a date with her. Like the most vivacious one is Chrissy, aka Janet, which is funny to me because I was always a Janet guy anyway. It's like Terry's my favorite blonde roommate, but Janet is my favorite roommate. I love Joyce DeWitt. I don't know why she didn't do anything else. There's a certain era after season 1, but before the Pat Benatar hair, where I think she's just gorgeous. Like, I love Joyce DeWitt. So to see that play out in Man About the House, because it's supposed to be platonic, but it's platonic in that like who's the boss way, where it's like, okay, we might have to watch this for 7 years, but eventually they're getting together. Whereas Three's Company, they will kiss each other on the mouth, but it's a very sibling-like relationship pretty early on.
It is so weird how much mouth kissing, just like friendly, like whenever John Ritter is excited, oh, that's so wonderful, and he'll grab Joyce DeWitt by the cheeks and kiss her on the mouth, and it's just a happy moment. There's never any like tension between them because of that.
Right, because I didn't even think about it until watching Man About the House. You're like, oh, they really were pursuing things here. Because another difference to me, because this isn't really jeers or cheers, differences, where it's like Mrs. Roper in America shows a slight passing interest in Jack in the pilot because he's a young man, she is neglected, and he just happens to be there, and that's her thing, like, ooh, a hot young man. But over time, she becomes like their mom. It's a very familial situation in Three's Company when they have real boundaries and actual like feelings and relationships in Man About the House, because in Man About the House, Mildred Roper, as opposed to Helen Roper, kind of has this cougar vibe to her, and there's a moment in the pilot where you feel like she actually doesn't want him there any more than her husband does. But then there's kind of like a Miss Drysdale and Jethro thing throughout the series where it's like, if she could get Jack, she would take Jack. It's not a like surrogate mother thing like Helen Roper was.
I don't know if you got deep enough into Man About the House to notice this either, but very early in Three's Company, Mrs. Roper discovers the truth about Jack. So she's in on it the whole time, and she helps them to hide it from Stanley Roper, her husband. But on Man About the House, I don't know that Mildred ever figures it out, really. Like, she's still sort of interested, but I don't remember like seeing an episode where she is like, oh, okay, I'm in on it with you. But I could be wrong.
I didn't get that far, but that is a good point for us to talk about this, where growing up, most of the sex stuff went over my head.
Right.
Like probably for like most of us. But I will maintain, outside of a handful of episodes, the gay thing doesn't come up that much, especially if you miss the pilot, because it's almost like a throwaway thing. It's right before the curtain call of the pilot. It's, oh, well, he's gay. And it's like, oh, I guess he can stay. It's like a quick wrap up, but it only comes into play, I would say, like 5 times over 8 seasons of Three's Company, as opposed to here, where it's very important in a lot of different ways. And this was something I found interesting, where Okay, in Three's Company, the Ropers own the building. They are the property owner and the landlord, so they kind of have like the final say. This is where like cultural things come into play. In Man About the House, that is a church commissioned property. It is owned by the Church of England, and the Ropers are really just hired to be property managers. They do not own it, they do not have final say. So, were this to come out about Jack, I feel like a lot of heads would roll. But I'm also shocked that they were that progressive in the 70s to be like, okay, that's cool. Because I found that to be the case with Three's Company. Like, upon looking back on it, it's really weird to me that in 1977, Mr. Roper was like, okay, I guess it's okay. It doesn't take much for him. And it's like, does he love money that much? Like, that would be an issue today in some places. Now, I know we're saying it's Santa Monica and it's California and blah, blah, blah. But I have always found that dynamic strange, where it's just like making him gay made it okay for him to live there because there won't be any hanky panky. Because all they were scared of was hanky panky. They were not scared of anything that might have come to the table with Jack or with Robin, you know? And even the reason I say it's very important also for Man About the House, Three's Company treats it as a throwaway thing. It pops up when a landlord comes over or if Jack's caught in public with a girl, that kind of deal. But here, they actually bring in gay characters who are not exactly caricatures. They kind of like orbit. It's not like somebody you saw and they get thrown out, because this is a very important part missing from the American pilot that's still in the Man About the House pilot in how they come up with him being gay. Because before they come to that conclusion of like, this is how we get him to live here, Robin tells the women that he got somebody's number at the party the night before, that his name was Douglas, and that he said that I might be able to move in with him. So they sit and watch as he calls Douglas. He's like, hi, Douglas, it's Robin from the party last night. And he's like, oh, okay, Dougie. He's like, so you said there might be I might be able to like stay with you. It's like, oh, you had a row? Oh, I'm sorry to hear a spat. Yeah, he's like, oh, you had a spat. I'm sorry to hear about that. And then like over time, and he's like, gay? Well, I guess I'm happy enough. You know, it's like you only hear the conversation from Robin's side, but the women are watching laughing because they already knew Douglas was gay. They knew who was at their party. So it's like they're just watching, they're setting him up for failure, watching this train wreck. But that's when the wheels start turning. So where it's like when the Ropers come down, it's like, oh, well, we told him you're gay. And then there you go. Which like, I think it adds to the lore where like, it's not necessary, but I appreciated it more than just like that being on the fly in Three's Company.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's very, very well worked out. And like you say, probably more accepted in Europe at the time than it was in America at the time. When it plays out on the series, like there is like an episode where like Mr. Roper's niece comes to town and she's really into Jack and she's like really like pursuing him at a certain point, like in the Roper's apartment. And then they come home and she's in lingerie and it's all this crazy stuff. But then by the end, like the only part of it that I feel like doesn't work is in the final episode when Jack tells Mr. Furley, he's like, oh, I'm moving in with a woman, but he implies a woman I'm romantically interested in. And then Mr. Furley is so happy for him. He's like, you're cured. Like that wouldn't fly today. Like that explanation, all that. But like Jack's like, oh, well, just hanging around a manly man like you really taught me something, you know? So it's like, it's interesting. Like at the time, like that definitely fits for like, you know, the perception and all of that. But it just nowadays, people would look at that and go, ugh.
It depends. There are places that would fly, but it has to be organic and part of the like tapestry. For example, Big Bang Theory. Laurie Metcalf is like Sheldon's holy roller Bible thumping mother. If in that situation, she too would say, you're cured. And that show just ended like within the last decade. You know what I mean? It's like there are certain characters, you wouldn't have that on Modern Family because that would tear that show apart. But it's like if you put it on like a Netflix series no one's ever going to watch, you can still pull that off.
Well, it you know, it makes sense sense for the Mr. Furley character to think that way, like 100%, like it fits. So it's not like totally jarring. I just feel like I could think of there'd be a million think pieces and clickbait articles if that was the season finale of the series, you know?
Well, I've often wondered if there's a lot of subtext there that just like went over our heads. And I have, what is it, Come and Knock on Our Door, which is like the history of Three's Company. I haven't read it yet. It was like a thrift find. If you look at Ralph Furley, the joke there is visually, he's the gayest old man you've ever seen. But he struggles to project masculinity. Like he and his brother Bart are manly men, and they're just men, and the whole like, oh, RF, I guess you rubbed off on me. Like he's proud of that because he thinks he exudes masculinity, but he wears ascots. His hair is fabulous. I've always loved that about Mr. Furley, where it's like this. He's one of those characters where like in the reboot, that's the joke. It's real tired, but it's just kind of like, he doesn't realize we know he is, but he totally is, you know?
Yeah.
Like, but back then they just kind of like played it straight of like, yeah, no. Because I don't think he was ever successful with women. In fact, when it comes to the Lana character who gets written out after like 5 episodes, like he's almost Urkel Stalker level with her. They never figured out his testosterone.
Yeah, that is worth mentioning. The one other castaway character during the whole history of Three's Companies, during this like bringing in Cindy, revamping, making Larry a main character on the show, they do bring in Anne Wedgeworth, and she's like, you know, this like cougar basically who's after Jack. Like she's super into Jack, but he's trying to palm her off onto Mr. Furley, and that's supposed to be this dynamic that's going to play out. But she doesn't really fit. They've already got a shtick. They've already got a rhythm on the show. So to add one more element, they realized very early was too much. And so like she just disappears. And apparently the actress wasn't happy with how they were writing her anyway. So she's like, I want to get out of here. This isn't working.
Lana's a very strange character because it's like the writers went into a liquor store and saw an Elvira cutout and they were like, what if we just like did this but took out all the horror? And that's because that's really who Lana is. I don't think she's ever worn a color that wasn't black. She's great value Elvira.
For sure, Elvira's aunt or something. Right. Hey, we know what we love about Three's Company, but we got to find out, what did we like about Man About the House? So let's find out in our Cheers. Okay, so now that we've experienced it, I think the Robin Tripp character is great. This actor does carry the series. I mean, John Ritter, you could say carried Three's Company, but I really think it was an ensemble piece. Him and Janet, at the very least, were the core and the heart of the show. But like this guy, like you can see why he would get a spin-off on his own eventually, because I just think he is so charismatic. Like, you know, we talked about Austin Powers up top. He feels like an Austin Powers type, but that is actually cool. That is not, you're making fun of him. And I really, really enjoyed his performance all throughout the series because it's very low-key and sly. He doesn't do physical comedy like John Ritter. There's none of that. It's all, you know, a sly smile when he's making some like double entendre or something, you know, like he's a lot of fun to see on screen and his evolution. But what did you think of Robin?
Definitely. I love John Ritter, but Robin Tripp is a more successful execution of what that character's about than Jack Tripper was. It's like you're saying that like Austin Powers thing. The whole show has like hints of that mod era left on it because the timing is very important. We don't get Three's Company until almost the 80s, but like this show started in the early 70s. So it's still got like flakes of 60s on it. And so like he very much is kind of like one of those like, oh yeah, I went to high school with the Beatles kind of guys. Like he could have been that guy. And I was watching it with my youngest and she's 7 because I started watching Three's Company at 7. She's like, Daddy, is he smoking? I was like, yeah, you could do that back then. I was like, he's a cool guy, but most importantly, he has this like edge to him where there is a credible threat for him to be living with 2 women. That's very important to this. The problem I always had with Three's Company, I love Jack Tripper, but some of the lore we always got about Jack, like, oh, I boxed in the Navy. Really? Because like we've seen enough episodes where he like cowered behind bullies. Yeah, he's a little rusty by that point. There's an episode where he boxes and gets his clock cleaned. Like Furley ends up getting knocked out. Jack was a puppy dog. He was never really a threat. But like Robin coming in there, and this is my favorite part. I don't know if you caught this. He was doing the Cosby thing where like he was predominantly wearing shirts of American universities. Bill Cosby did that on the Cosby Show that we don't really talk about now because of like everything going on with him. But like he would have schools send him sweatshirts. As Cliff Huxtable, he was basically giving them free advertising because he loved higher education that much. And it's the same with Robin. I don't know the reason behind it, but in the pilot, he's wearing like a University of Maryland sweatshirt, but it doesn't say of. It's just University Maryland. So I'm not sure if that's one of the remainders that didn't make it to Raw. But then one episode he's wearing a Purdue University shirt. Like these are not British universities. I don't know what it was about. But to bring up the Big Bang Theory again, it's almost like Sheldon style where he's always wearing like a superhero / pop culture shirt over a long sleeve shirt. Like Robin is always wearing a long sleeve American University shirt, but it's kind of working for him because they're usually kind of like, they're not fresh, and maybe it's the film quality, maybe I don't know what it is, but Robin dresses like he found those clothes. You know what I mean? It's like he went to the Salvation Army and threw down a couple quid and he just grabbed whatever was there. Didn't even try it on, you know, but like that is his vibe. He's shaggy. When you think of the old guys who came back from World War II saying like, get a haircut, he's who they're talking about, you know, like you just want to take some clippers to him. He almost has like one speed. Like he never seems to really care about anything. It's like, I don't know if this will make sense to you. There's a wrestler right now in a promotion called AEW. His name is Orange Cassidy. And I hate this guy. He wears a denim jacket and jeans and sunglasses. And his whole thing is like, well, he just kind of stands in the ring and he clearly doesn't care. It's like, I'm here. I don't care.
And yeah, hands in his pockets, and he'll just wrestle the match without ever moving his hands.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And it's like, that's Robin Tripp to me. It's like he went to a party, he's been in London for like 2 weeks or something, he needed a place to stay, and life just kind of happens to him. Like, even though he wants this restaurant, that's the one difference. When he says he wants a restaurant, I don't believe it as much as I believe it from Jack Tripper, because Jack Tripper seems a little more goal-oriented. Robin Tripp is kind of like laissez-faire. I'm just going where the wind takes me, love. Do you have a light? You know, he's that guy.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, he doesn't seem to have a ton of ambition, and yet you just like having him around. And there's enough energy and variety in the show, like you say, that they bring in a lot more like recurring characters, like the two gay guys that are always around, like making comments, and they're kind of hitting on him, but he doesn't pick up on it really, you know, like for most of the series he's just kind of like okay, yeah, but it's just there's a lot of interesting, you know, supporting cast that float in and out, including there's a Larry character, you know, like
who is Larry? His name is Larry. But even people who float into the background here got more attention there. Like Jim the bartender at the Regal Beagle, we saw him a handful of times. The bartender here is a supporting character. Like he's pretty important.
Yeah, so it's just the way that it's crafted as a show, as an ensemble, as a universe, it feels very lived in. I will say, like, the Three's Company set always felt cheap to me, and like it's barely furnished. It looks like a set, whereas their flat on this show looks lived in. It looks real.
They have plates on shelves. Like, I always hated like the fact that it was a furnished apartment. I'm like, well, they are only paying $100 each in 1980, but like everything's like rattan. Nothing's actually like furniture. That was another thing. I love this apartment more. Not just the interior, the exterior is much nicer. Now, that's probably because it's church property, but I'm just saying, like, it's built like a townhouse, the exterior of it, but like inside, it's your standard walk up, but like, it's a much nicer place to live. Like, everything about the Santa Monica place looked just kind of thrown together. I know it had that like almost Pueblo style kind of like arcs and all that, but I never loved the apartment. And this one definitely feels homey. It doesn't feel like it was like the set for a high school play.
Yeah, and they shoot it from more angles, it feels like, as well. Just the use of the space. And like, last thing I'll just say is I feel like this show, there can be that cultural barrier. Yeah, they're speaking English, but it's English terms I don't understand, some of the time. But I find the show very watchable and universal. Like, it is something that I feel like if it did play, like in a syndicated package, not on PBS, but on some, network on a weekend or whatever, I could have sat down to watch it and enjoyed it. And you get the sexual politics of it all, you get the comedy, just the attitudes of everybody, like really it does play through. It doesn't keep you at a distance because it's just like, oh, they're stuffy British people. They're not. They're cool British people. And the Ropers are sort of stuffy, but they're also funny. So like, right. So it works.
You're definitely right. It's easily watchable. We always say we've gotten too smart for TV, but this is in the sweet spot. You don't have to think too hard. There's no, like, other than like in the pilot where it's just like a blink and you miss it, he's gay. You could drop in and out and you still know what's going on. That's how I watched Three's Company most of my life. It's like background noise. And this would be great background noise. I mean, I was playing like Beauty Shop with my youngest while this thing was going on, and it's like, oh, they're trying to hide a dog. Oh, they're doing that episode. But like, there's one episode that we got in Three's Company where they get a dog and they got to hide it from the Ropers because they're not allowed to have pets. I remember in Three's Company, there's one dog and it's cute and they got to hide it and blah, blah, blah. For some reason, in Man About the House, there are many dogs. There are multiple dogs. So they end up giving one to the bartender. And then, like, I think Larry takes one or they get them from Larry. But the thing that's hilarious to me, first of all, it is a prime example of why they say never work with babies or animals, because these animals did not have trainers and they're adorable. And I'm not even a dog person, but it's like they were just dogs being dogs. Like they didn't know they were being filmed. But also, I don't know how long this shoot was. I swear you watched the dog get bigger throughout the episode. And they didn't have possession of it that long. But like, it's an actual puppy at the beginning. And it's like a month old by the end of the episode.
So yeah, there's a lot to enjoy about it. But then, there are some things about it, I think, that would make it to where people might say, this is maybe not for me. So why don't we find out what those might be with our cheers?
Boo! Boo! Boo!
The big thing that you brought up, which I think is missing, is a purpose for the Joe character. Because you see this blonde friend of Chrissy, essentially, like, they were there before Robin gets into the picture, but she's just always there making commentary, but she doesn't have any forward momentum. Like, you don't know anything about her, just that she's there and she's going to have a comment about a situation. And that's really it.
And she still has the, like, quote unquote dumb blonde comments. But the save for American Chrissy is, well, she's pretty. But this one is just kind of like, she's not giving that off. Chrissy Snow is almost childlike, which there's a whole psychological thing to get into,
right,
because she's built like this goddess, but she has the brain of a child. And so it's like she says something stupid and you just rub her hands like, thank God you're beautiful. But like, you don't have that with Joe. And that's a cultural thing, because I'm really trying, like, I hope we have international listeners, but I mean, both of these women had the teeth of a beaver. I don't know if that's considered. I mean, I always think back to, like, when we were first introduced to Camilla Parker Bowles, and the British press always said, well, she's a handsome woman. It's just kind of like, that's the best we can do. So I don't know the UK conversion rate of beauty, but, like, it wasn't here with the Joe character. So when she did say the dumb thing, it's more like you want to slap her with the newspaper than how you would react to Chrissy Snow. So like, that is a problem. And the fact that she lasts the whole time, but also, and I thought about this, where I can now understand Joyce DeWitt's bitterness had she gotten cast for her role based on Man About the House. because based on Man About the House, she's a much more important character. She would have been the lead woman, and then there just would have been this Joe person or whatever we named her over here. But Suzanne Summers came and completely, as they say in rap, blew up her spot. Like, watching this show, I now understand, because she was bitter for a lot of reasons. They snuck Three's a Crowd on her, and I mean, we'll talk about that when we get to it, but she didn't know there was a spinoff. She thought all of them were ending the show. So that was just kind of like apparent to me. But yeah, Joe, they never really seemed to know what to do with her.
Yeah, and we should say, in the history of Three's Company, they made a last minute change. They had a different actress in the final pilot playing Chrissy, and they just knew, they're like, we still don't have the right dynamic. And one of the producers went back and checked the audition tapes and like, wait, this Suzanne Summers gal, why did we not have her back? Like, let's get her back here. Let's try her one more time. And they realized, we need her. Like, she's got the star power. Just, and she wasn't even like really a trained actress in any big way, but they're like, let's get her in here. And she was the secret sauce that they needed to make it work. And like you say, with the Joe character, it seems like they should have recast. They should have found, what is it, a page 5 girl in in the UK, just somebody who did have, you know, the sex pot energy, just to add something extra to the show. Like, because you basically just have two of the same character, but one of them isn't allowed any characterization. Like, the dialogue between Joe and Chrissy is almost identical. Like, you just don't feel like it really matters ultimately. And that Chrissy, she's got a greater sense of who she is and what she wants to do. But like, really, when I look back at the rest of the show, I'm like, that really is the only thing where you're just like, I don't know why you're here, and it frustrates. But like, did you have another jeer? Because really, for me, otherwise the show works great.
Well, back to the Suzanne Summers thing, I think, didn't they see her in a American Graffiti because she was Corvette Girl? And like, that's when people took notice of her, and then they knew like, oh, why didn't we get, because I always remember like, that's her like on-screen debut, I
Right.
think. But yeah, and then they did all that. Joe exists in Man About the House for balance, because you need two women. You need the triangle, because it's much more salacious if this man and this woman, both strangers, are living together. That's a den of sin. But if you put another woman there, maybe there's like an accountability buddy or something. But that's really like, on paper, the purpose Joe serves, because they hadn't carved out anything else for her. She and Chrissy both work at the same company. They already are this package deal at work. They're a package deal at home, but she's really just like a purity detector. She has to be there so the tripod doesn't fall over.
That is a good justification for why she's there. But they didn't do anything with her after putting her in place to hold it all up.
True. And I do have another jeer, where in Three's Company and in their spinoff, I believe that Stanley truly loves Helen. He doesn't know how to show it all the time, and he's an old curmudgeon, and that's just who he is. She knows who he is, but every now and then she would like to be appreciated. And after 15 years of marriage, I understand that dynamic. But George and Mildred Roper, especially in the pilot, is almost like a War of the Roses situation. I don't believe these two people love each other. I think they did it one time, but I think the love is gone. And now it's a marriage of convenience, because keep in mind, as people say, they're kind of on the dole. Like, they're getting paid to just watch this apartment, like that they don't own, they don't really have to worry about. And I just feel like it's a marriage of convenience. But from what I saw, I didn't see many glimmers of like, oh, they've still got love for each other. And I mean, it's just a different take. That didn't hurt me or anything. It's just kind of like, what do you do with that? Because I don't think you play it the same way. And they're the same scripts. It's like, oh, she feeds George dog food by accident. That kind of deal. Like, what do you do? Or how do those scenes hit now? Because yeah, Stanley was grumpy. Like, you wanted him to eat dog food for the laugh. But like, George you kind of wanted to kill him. These Ropers aren't lovable like the American Roper.
Interesting. Okay, because I actually like George better than I like Stanley, better than Norman Fell. I think he's just a funnier character. Is he lovable? Not 100%, but like to your point, like, do they ever show love to each other? There is an episode in series 3 where Robin needs to be with Chrissy at a party and he needs to learn how to dance. And Mrs. Roper misunderstands and she's like, fine, I'll teach you. And he's like, oh, okay, we're doing this. And they're dancing. She's teaching him and having her little flirty dance with Robin. And then George comes in and he's like, what's going on here then? And he's like, oh, remember when we used to dance together? And she's like, yes. And then so Robin like passes Mrs. Roper off to her husband. And then they have like this like romantic, like reminiscent dance together. So I think there was something there that they started rekindling towards the end, I guess, before they got spun off into their own show. But it's kind of interesting, yeah, your take, because I would say for me, like George is a cheer over Norman Fell, who we'll talk about next episode in greater detail.
There's something Norman Fell does that George doesn't that's always going to make him my favorite. And everybody should know what this is, but George never smirks at the camera.
I know, breaking the fourth wall. That's the Norman Fell.
Oh, I love that.
All right. Well, now we got to figure this out, Will, though. So obviously they figured out how to make it work in the US by reinterpreting a few bits and pieces here. And it was a formula that worked out. But we have to say, if we were going to come into the British series, figure it out as we arrive across the pond as the Show Doctors. I mean, my number one thing is, who do you replace the actress that played Jo with? I think that's really what we have to fix. And can you think of somebody at that time that would have worked? And I have somebody in mind who is not from the UK, but that could have been an extra element that made the character pop a little bit more and stand out. And I think it's Olivia Newton-John getting in there as Jo, because she has the sex appeal. She has some flavor of comedy. I don't know if it's 100% that she's really a comedian, but I feel like she could give a little spark that would be funny, but she could also play ditzy. We've seen her in Grease play like very innocent and naive, which is, you know, essential to the Chrissy Snow character. So like, I feel like she has the right mix where she's like, okay, she's not British, but she's close enough. And there could be a lot of, it's almost like Chrissy being from Fresno. She can tell about her traditions and her, this is how we do things back home type thing. And I think that might be interesting, but I don't know. What do you think?
I like it. I hadn't thought about that. Because, see, my take on it is the same way I say, like, Jo is like the balance. You could also think of Jo as like the training wheels, right? So I think we get to a point where we take off the training wheels and we could do the like you send Jo home like you sent Chrissy home. I say we don't replace her. I think that we have kind of, at this point, like it's really salacious to start out with this man and woman stranger. But now that we've gotten to know them and they settled into a rhythm and then Jo leaves at a point when everybody thinks they finally found their station, and that's all thrown for a loop. It's a soft reboot in a way, because now people don't know who they are or where they stand because the tripod lost a leg. That's kind of how I float it, because one major distinction between Man About the House and Three's Company is that the media, like media journalists of the time, and even like that's his legacy, it was a key component of jiggle television. It and Charlie's Angels and all this, whereas like these beautiful women with low performing bras just bouncing around the screen. And that's what it is here. It's this like sexy bawdy show that's not what Man About the House is. So it's like we talk about like, oh, we could put in this person who brings sex appeal. The show doesn't need sex appeal. My biggest problem with Jo is she has no personality. I'm just saying, just give me someone who stands out on their own. They don't have to be hot, because chances are it's the Celsius level of hot anyway. So I'm just like, that's not what it's about. Just give me someone who has a strong personality that stands out, but also complements everyone who's already there. So I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking about that era. I'm like, you can't get Joanna Lumley. Diana Rigg's not the right age. But I'm just like, and they're also known for being beautiful. What you'd really have to do is go to like EastEnders and then find like what one of them looked like back then and do your casting, because it seems like all roads lead to EastEnders over there, which I mean, I wish our fallen stars all ended up on soaps here, but that's just how it is. I mean, there's a guy, he was like Arrow's stepdad like a decade ago. Now he's on EastEnders.
Wow. And I do have to correct myself too. I said Olivia Newton-John is not British. She actually was born in England, but then they moved to Australia. But so she has the Australian accent because she basically just grew up there. So technically she would qualify, but I agree with you. It's more about the writing than it is about the actress playing the character. I don't think she's terrible. Like you said, they just don't give her anything to do. And that really is just something that the series needed to give it, a little bit more spice and make it a more interesting watch throughout. But overall, I think it has been fun to explore Man About the House and realize how much it had to offer. And we should say, for those who didn't get a chance to check it out yet before this episode dropped, you can find it. It's on YouTube. It's on, archive.org. You can find those in very nice transfers. So it's easy enough to watch and enjoy. So if you've ever been curious to be like, oh, wait a minute, there's a British Threes Company. It's like, oh, yes, there is. And as we indicated up top, this series then goes on to spin off these characters, these very popular characters, into their own series, a fate that befell the American counterparts as well. So next time around, we are going to explore just how that worked out for the Ropers as they got their own headlining series with a new premise. We will tell you all about it then. So we invite you to continue on with us on our Come and Knock on Our Pod 3-part series for Three's Company, prequels and spin-offs, however you want to look at it. If you want to have the real inside track, we will tell you, we've been calling this series internally Cacoop because it is Cakoop. So we're talking about, this is Cacoop Part 1. You can come back for Cacoop Part 2. But in the meantime, if you want to stay connected with us, make sure you're following at Remember Show Pod on the socials. So that's when you'll know when a new episode is dropping. And occasionally we're sharing some other details about where to find the shows so you can stream it for yourself. But Will, if people want to stay in touch with you and the thoughts that are coming out of your mind on a daily basis, where can they follow you?
I'm everywhere at William B. West. Lately, it's mainly TikTok and Blue Sky, or my website, westweekever.com.
And I am at Hoju Coolander. So find me, see my posts about continuing to live a retro life. I might as well have Three's Company on the TV as far as I'm concerned. Plus, I got VHS tapes full of BBC shows that were exported here in the 80s, so I could watch those anytime. The Young Ones or Faulty Towers or whatever it might have been. But in the meantime, we will be back. Be ready to knock on our door again. But for now, we're changing the channel.
This has been a presentation of Geekster Media.